if you have any faith at all in the United States government to solve this problem, we are in the wrong place for the next 2 hours. You should have no faith in the federal government to fix any bit of this problem. As a matter of fact, many of the reasons why health care is expensive in the United States of America is because of what the government has done. So, my students usually find me to be offensive about the first 5 minutes of the semester, and so, keeping with tradition, I know I've offended some of you that believe in government to do good things. Well, first of all, I'd like to address this definition of the word expensive. I believe in the theory of relativity as it applies to economics, and when people say healthcare costs too much, is too expensive, I ask them, well, what is the definition of too much, and what is the definition of expensive? You could say that a Mercedes-Benz is expensive if you can't afford one. You might be able to afford one and still say it's expensive, but economists always want to know expensive relative to what? And I think most Americans say healthcare is expensive relative to what we feel it should be. And I want to emphasize the word feel, because a lot of Americans, when it comes to healthcare, use a great deal of emotion to analyze the healthcare market, but they haven't given a great deal of thought as to how we got here. Well, what we see now in the United States of America, where, for example, the current estimates are somewhere around 45 million people do not have health care insurance. Health care makes up 17% of our nation's economy. The gross domestic product of the United States, the value of everything produced in our country, is about $10.7 trillion, which is more than all of Europe combined. So we have an enormous economy, and 17% of it is related to health care. That's about $2 trillion. Healthcare is the biggest industry in the United States of America, and it's the one whose price is going up the most rapidly over time. We don't see prices going up in DVD players. We see gas prices going down every now and then, but healthcare, we never hear about deflation. We only hear about inflation. So we see the effect in 2003. The next election is going to revolve a great deal around healthcare. President Bush has talked about reforming Medicare, while at the same time he's talked about adding an unbelievably expensive new program called discounted, if not free, prescription drugs for senior citizens. We have many of the people running from the Democratic Party that believe it's now time. In the words of Dennis Kucinich from Ohio, he says now it is time, quote, to get profit out of health care and have the federal government run the entire system. You may recall 10 years ago, during President Clinton's 1993 State of the Union address, he stood before the American people. He held up a red, blue, and gold card that had an eagle on it, and he said, from now on, from the time you're born until the time you die, you will not go without health insurance. And he appointed his wife and hundreds of other very bright individuals to form a committee to look at health care, with the goal being to take health care out of the private sector and model it after Canada or Great Britain or any number of other countries that have national health care. You'll notice 10 years later we don't have a national health care system, and I'm going to explain to you today there's a reason for that. When the people read the devil of the details of the Clinton plan, when they saw what our taxes would have to look like to give free health care, when they saw the doctors and nurses and other practitioners no longer being able to help people make good decisions, but government bureaucrats making those decisions, when people saw how much freedom they were about to lose under the Clinton plan, they decided that, expensive or not, for now, we were going to stick with our current system. Well, here we are 10 years later, and everything we're going to see on this videotape, we're going to see bits and pieces of a videotape from 1992. Everything we're going to see on this videotape is not only still going on today, but has gotten a whole lot worse. So, the 2004 election, the 2008 election, 2012, the presidential elections in the future are going to revolve around what to do about this issue. So let's start. I've got 11 different things we're going to cover with respect to how we got here, and we're going to start with perhaps, well, we start from the beginning, where we should always start, right? One of the major reasons, and the first major reason healthcare is expensive, is because of something that happened during World War II. From 1776 until World War II in the United States of America, health care was relatively inexpensive, and it was very simple. It was simple in that if A got sick and went to visit B, the doctor, A paid the bill when they left or got a bill and paid it off. That was it. But during World War II, you recall that when we were out trying to fight the Germans and the Japanese, we sent a lot of people over to do that, but at home we needed people to build the tanks and the jeeps and the guns and windshields for jets and all this other stuff. And so the demand for skilled labor started to increase dramatically. Well, economists have to say demand and supply somewhere, so forgive me for those of you that haven't never had economics before. But when the demand for anything goes up, the shortages start to break out. Businesses were clamoring for skilled labor, and so demand kept going up and up. And when shortages of anything breaks out, over time the price of that good or service starts to go up. So businesses, the tank representative would show up outside the Jeep factory at the end of the day, standing there knowing that they needed more people to build tanks, and he would stand there as the Jeep people are walking out saying, hey, I'd like you to come work over across the street to build tanks. And the Jeep guy would say, I've got a good job. And I say, yes, but whatever they're paying you, I'll give you even more to come over here and make tanks. So when the shortages broke out and upward pressure began on wages and salaries in the United States, the federal government became so concerned that higher wages and salaries would lead to higher prices. And we all know that when prices go up throughout the economy, that's called inflation. They were so concerned about inflation skyrocketing during World War II, where, as an economist, I'd like to explain that when inflation starts to go up dramatically, at some point wages stop keeping up with inflation and people's real purchasing power starts to collapse. When that happens, the economy collapses. And of course, the last thing you want in the middle of a world war is to slip back into another recession that we just come out of in the 1930s. So the federal government passed a law making it illegal for businesses to raise wages and salaries during World War II. Now, what if the demand for gasoline went up and there were shortages and the government said, no, you can't charge more than $1.40? Long lines for gas. Businesses were handed a federal mandate. You can't do it. You can't fix salaries and wages according to supply and demand. And they were scrambling on, what do I do? What do I do? I still need labor. And so the tank representative said, I've got it. The next day, went to the Jeep factories. People were coming out said, listen, I'd like you to come work for me. People saying, well, why? I'm making the same here. What if I pay for your medical care? What if I offer you a non-cash payment of insurance for your health care? Now, health insurance, born during World War II, plays an enormous part in where we are today because it totally destroys the laws of supply and demand as it applies to A going to B. Consider this. What do textbooks cost in healthcare related stuff? I object before I came here. All right, so you show up with one book and they say, all right, give us $8,000. Okay, fine. Just kidding. It seems like it, right? Yeah. So you show up with your $200 book, right? Now, what if you showed up with that one book at the bookstore and you put it on the counter and the clerk said, that will be $600. And you said, well, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. You scanned it. And as you can clearly see, this book is $200. And the clerk said, well, I know, but the two people that came in before you didn't have any money, so we just gave them a book for free. You look like you've got some money, and so 200 plus 200 plus your 200, give us $600. You would throw a fit, unless you had textbook insurance. Oh, yeah. It is not my fault that I ended up in the emergency room last February. It's Blue Cross Blue Shield's fault. My wife and I took our first vacation away from our 3 children in many years in February, and we decided to go skiing in New Hampshire. My wife is a horrible snow skier. I hope nobody's recording well, but I'll get the video. She knows she's horrible, but she tries very hard. over the years, I've gotten pretty good at snow skiing, but to being a good husband, at least the first day we were there, I was on the little bunny slopes, and honey, you're doing great. Pull her out of the ditch, you're doing great. So it's about 4 o'clock, and it's starting to get a little bit dark there. And she said, you know, I'm cold and tired. I think we'll go down and have some hot chocolate. Would you like to come with me? But there was about 45 minutes left before they closed the slopes. I said, I think I'm going to hang out a little bit longer. So it's all by myself. And ladies, as you know, when you leave your husband, that's when the trouble starts. So I get on the chairlift, past the bunny slope, past the green and the blue. So I go up to black, and I say, all right, it's time to have some fun. So I get up there, and I'm kind of scanning the slopes out there, and I notice at the bottom of this first hill, there's a natural ramp made out of snow that some skiers are going down. They're hitting this ramp and, you know, flying 10, 15 yards through the air and landing and saying, I really love those 16-year-old Finnish kids during the Winter Olympics that get on those little astronaut suits and down the ski jumps and flying miles. This is incredible. So I thought, this is what I want to do. And it's, now, if it was the old days where if Chambliss does something stupid and goes to the doctor and I have to pay my bill, I'd probably go around the ramp and on down the slope. But in the back of my mind, I'm sure somewhere health insurance factored into the thought that this would be a good idea to go over this ramp. So I get into a tug and go flying down this hill, and as I look up, I notice that about this much of the ramp was intact and a nice slope, but about this much of the ramp had broken off, and it was just a wall of ice and snow about 4 feet high. And I noticed the wall when I hit it at 50 miles an hour. And my goal of achieving air did happen, but I didn't expect my clothes to fly off and the skis getting down on the trees and what have you. I was in the air so long that I actually had time to think, Jack, this is not going to turn out well. I landed on the back of my neck, the bottom part of my body crunched into the top part of my body. I heard this explosion in my ribs. If you've ever had a broken rib, it's just horrible. And I begged him for a cast, and I kept saying, look, dummy, you can't put a cast on a rib. So, there I lie there, groaning and crying and all this other stuff. They come pick me up. They take me to the ambulance. I don't ask how much an ambulance ride is. I have insurance. They said, sir, do you need some oxygen? Sure, what the hell? Give me some oxygen. I'm on my first ambulance ride. I want some oxygen. They tried to put an IV in my arm. They couldn't do it. I don't know why they're doing it. And I didn't even ask. Insurance. I get to the doctor. Okay, Mr. Chambliss, we're going to do some x-rays. Do all you want. Do all you want. If you mess up, no problem. Lying there, they're starting to talk about all these wonderful drugs. I want all of them, of course. At no time did I ever ask, is this necessary? What does it cost? I didn't even sweat it. I'd go back home, and of course the first thing I get in the mail isn't even a bill. It's just a statement. Blue Cross is gracious enough to say, listen, had you had to pay for it yourself, here's what it would have cost. $1,500 or whatever it was. But I see the statement, and here's the beautiful part. There's things on the list. There's things on the list of what they say they did to me in New Hampshire. I don't even know what the stuff is. I see a price next to it. Now, at the end of a restaurant meal, if I got a list of stuff they said I bought and I couldn't identify something on it, I'd say, excuse me, could you please tell me what this is? But I get the statement, I don't even know what's on the list. I don't even call the hospital or the ambulance. They could have triple charged me. They could have charged me for anything. I don't care. Because I get the bill and I just send it off to Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now I want to show you something. And so there's actually 3 different people we're going to talk about with respect to this event called cost shifting. But I want to show you what healthcare looks like in the United States of America. It's a very easy system to understand. So just follow the arrows, okay? Now, we'll get to the homeless people, and we'll get to the person on Medicare in just a moment. But right now, we're going to talk about myself, okay? Now, let's say there was a homeless person that got hit by a bus early in the day. They come in, their bill's $3,000. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. We're going to see it in just a moment. They've got, in the emergency rooms, they've got to take anybody that comes in. The public emergency room, by law, cannot say, I'm sorry, you don't have any money, go home. They do that at Circuit City. I'd like a DVD player. Do you have any money? No, go home. We can't do that here. I'm not even saying we should. I'm just saying they can. So the homeless person comes in, all right, fine, they've got no money. The next person that comes in is an elderly person. They've been in an accident. Let's say I ran them over while skiing, and they've got their Medicare card. The federal government, I'm sorry. I have to remind you, the federal government doesn't have any money. Did you know that? I hope you do, because the Zogby folks a few years ago did a poll, and they were asking about, the question was, who should pay for the prescription drugs of senior citizens? 50% of registered voters said the government should pay for prescription drugs, but not the taxpayers. That's the closest I've ever come to resigning at Valencia. I thought, there's no hope. 50% of voters think that the government's got some money. Now, since this was a scientific poll, that means there's a chance that almost half of the people in this room right now, but I'm going to assume that's not the case, are actually going, you mean they don't? No. Every dime the government spends starts with, you could call it confiscation, you could call a contribution, but it's taxes, okay? There's no such thing as a government program. They're all taxpayer programs. So, on Medicare, you've got the elderly person coming in. Whatever their bill is, Medicare usually reimburses the hospitals about 50% of whatever the charge is. So you've got the homeless person, the hospital's going to eat that entire $3,000. Then you've got the $1,500 that's unrecoverable from the Medicare patient. What if they're desperately poor and you can't get them to pay? That's $4,500. I come rolling in, and before they even ask me why I'm wheezing and crying, they ask me for my insurance card. And the moment I whip that thing out, it's party time. So I end up getting the bill, and to simplify, but realistic example, I get the bill for the homeless guy, the 50% that the Medicare patient is not going to pay, and my own bill. But when I get it, notice, I get a bill for I got a bill for $1,500, no problem. I send it to the insurance company, and I end up having to pay about $150 to $200 for all this stuff. That's not. You're going over a rap, it's worth $150 just to have the story to tell my friends. Now, we all hate the insurance companies. What are they doing wrong? We're the ones engaging in irresponsible behavior. We'll get to a lot of the irresponsible behavior in a moment. But I'm the one that up there, I'm costing you money. You realize this? My stupidity. You don't even go anywhere near New Hampshire, and you have to pay. Polly had to pay. The insurance premiums are going up at Valencia. Right? I'm sorry. I was one of the people that did this to you, because when Blue Shield gets the bill, I know we think they're supposed to be benevolent and just eat it all and not make profit. You know, that's, well, Karl Marx believed that. But communism didn't work very well. So Blue Shield gets the $7,500 bill in this case, but notice they then shift it to the business firms who provide our insurance. How many of you have ever heard anybody say, hey, Bob, how's your new job going? That's great. How's the pay? Well, the pay's not that great, but the medical insurance. You ever heard that statement? Make sure you understand what's going on in our country. Because of rising annual health insurance premiums, look what happens with what the business firms do. And we come over here. Oh, we've got to shift over there. Taxpayers pay half of the Medicare version. Notice, less full-time job opportunities. Businesses are interested in part-time and temporary help, not full-time as much, because they're not paying insurance. More workers are laid off. Businesses, with healthcare costs going up dramatically, businesses are looking to cut their costs wherever they can. Labor is the most expensive cost. Something's got to give. And there's a reason why, despite the fact our economy has been growing for the last 2 years, unemployment is staying relatively high. Part of it is because of health insurance premiums. Then you get smaller increases in wages and increased prices. The people don't understand. Right now I'm paying $459 a month to have just to have my wife and 3 kids covered with insurance. I bet it's another $200 a month for Valencia to cover me. That's $659 in wages I don't get every month. Because in lieu of a better salary, Valencia pays for me to have insurance. And you pay too. You pay in prices, you pay in job opportunities, you pay in wages, you pay in slower progression in your salary over time. And it's only going to get worse. And part of the problem all dates back to this idea. If I ask you to pick your favorite restaurant in Orlando, you got it in your mind? Your favorite one? If I told you, go to your favorite restaurant for the rest of this year and just send me the bill. Now let's say everybody in here had the same favorite restaurant, so all of you started going there. you'd go more often, wouldn't you? Would you go to your favorite restaurant more often if I paid for the bill? Yes. You'd order more things from the menu. You'd order more expensive things from the menu. Just bring the whole dessert cart, a little bit of everything. And if the restaurants found out I was doing it, they'd raise the menu prices, wouldn't they? A goes to B. If C pays, A doesn't care about the price. B doesn't care about the price. What's supposed to happen to the price? It's got to keep going up. So healthcare economics begins with the question of, if insurance is causing a lot of this, what do we do about that? I've got ideas, but I don't think you want a 7-hour lecture today, do you? All right. Let's go to the next thing on the list. Healthcare is expensive because it's not expensive enough. What? All right. Let me go up here. We're going to take a look at how a lot of people see America's emergency rooms. Emergency rooms where, gosh, you think if you went there at 2:38 a.m. on a Wednesday night, you get right in, right? How many of you have ever been in the emergency room and you're looking around at all these people and you don't know if they're a victim of something or just somebody waiting for a family member? They may be there with a cold. So what? All right, let's take a look. You're not going to film me standing on this chair, right? A little bit of dignity, please. All right, here we go.
And we must ensure that every American has access to quality care. Incredible. It's a time to be seen and cared for, and they often have no other recourse.
We'll never get control of the deficit. We'll never make the economy healthy again until we bring healthcare costs under control.
We're caught on the horns of a difficult dilemma. Try to save money and get him out. But yet, he's at greater risk of sudden death.
America's health care, going broke in style. Tonight, on the Brokaw Report, here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. We've heard about it and read about it, and a lot of us have experienced it. We're having a healthcare crisis in this country. We have the best doctors and the best hospitals in the world, but the system isn't working. 35 million Americans, maybe more, have no health coverage. Medical costs are rising more than 10% a year. They're a cancer on the national economy. Bill Clinton is determined to change that. Just this month, the insurance industry admitted it needs to reform. It's ready to back universal health coverage. We've got to change because we're going broke. How did the medical system get out of control? Well, lots of ways, it turns out. What drives costs? Just about everything. Doctors, patients, insurance companies, hospitals, lawyers, and the daily drama of big city emergency rooms.
An 18-year-old shot in the leg. His friends have brought him in, but they can't agree on how he got shot. The emergency room team works furiously to save the leg, to stop the bleeding. At the same time, police find dozens of crack vials in the victim's pockets.
Officially a prisoner.
Minutes later, a heroin overdose arrived. Then a medication overdose. A traffic accident victim. The emergency room is incredibly busy but never planted. small talk. It is a routine day in Temple University Hospital's ER. A day that mirrors the violence and crime and disease of the surrounding inner city streets. And then there are the sick people. The poor sick people who come to this emergency room for what doctors call primary medical care.
It might be a virus. Your throat looks okay.
Man, I think the waiting room and the doctor come out and call
When
you.
the trauma's hit, they have to wait. And it's hard to wait when you're sick and you don't think anyone cares.
How you doing, sir? I'm Dr. Cardell.
Emergency rooms like this one have to see everyone who walks through their doors. People with colds and headaches and stomach pains. All at the same time, it tries to put back together the blasted and torn victims of the wars on the city streets.
A physician and philosopher once said that practicing medicine gives you a front row in the theater of life. I think the emergency room takes you backstage. It really gives you life in its rawest form. Friday or Saturday night, it's the last place you should be for what's a routine problem. It's a gross inefficiency of the healthcare system, and I understand what they're trying to do, and I wish there were another way. He has a pulse, but it's going quick. Not losing his pulse.
A young emergency room doctor, great at what he does. And what he does can cost you money, even if you never go near the emergency room. We'll show you how when we come back.
Sorry, the commercials are still in here. People who ordered this from didn't take them out.
You're following Secret Service, NBC Sunday.
Today's hospitals look like something out of science fiction. Sophisticated machines and medical teams on alert to treat every medical problem. And if you have a serious accident, a violent injury, experts say the best place to go is an inner city emergency room. It may be in a rundown neighborhood, but the emergency room teams in the inner city are the best. The problem is that they have to do a lot more than treat emergencies.
So your monitor is ready?
15-year-old Diana Ortiz arrived at Temple's emergency room with no vital signs. Moments before, she was hit in the head by a stray bullet. Another innocent victim of North Philadelphia's vicious drug war. Attending physician Tony Cardell and his team worked on the girl for half an hour. The last desperate attempt to save her.
I think you could justifiably done nothing, but we made every effort to give the benefit of the doubt and attempted everything we could.
No expense was spared. It's possible Temple will never collect the $1,400 in medical costs. The hospital will consider this a charity case. Like many other shootings, fatal shootings, that are now part of the daily routine in the emergency room, the ER. However routine, Diana's youth and apparent innocence did get to the team. When they couldn't save her, they were depressed. But 10 minutes later, after Diana Ortiz was pronounced dead,
This looks pretty classic for an allergic kind of reaction.
Dr. Cardell was back at work with an allergy case.
I think it's dehumanizing to not be able to think about an individual death and its full implications. And it can be aggravating at times if you need that space, that psychological time just to cope. How you doing, sir? Dr. Cardell. On the other hand, it can be diverting to have to take care of another patient, however trivial the complaint. People wait incredible amounts of time to be seen and cared for, and they often have no other recourse.
No other recourse because most of Temple's patients are poor. Some of the tens of millions of Americans without private health insurance. Mary Bryant is here with her son. He may have fractured his toe. She has no insurance. This is where she comes for any complaint, even a cold.
Temple stays open all day, like 24 hours a day. You can come in anytime you want to, you know.
Temple charges $185 minimum to be seen in the ER. But Mary Bryant can pay nothing. Little Tyrone Harris has had diarrhea for 4 days. His mother says the emergency room is more thorough than her local clinic. A pediatrician is called in for a second opinion. A battery of tests is ordered. Tyrone's hospital bill will come to $887.30. Temple will absorb most of that cost, but it will be partially reimbursed by Medicaid. Patients like Tyrone and Mary Bryant's family crowd inner-city emergency rooms across the country. Sometimes they have to wait 6 to 8 hours. Sometimes they grow annoyed and leave and return in worse shape, like this man with stomach cramps.
My patients just ran short. Now here I'm all over now.
Sir, what's your name?
Others come in only when they fear they're at death's door. Elwood was beaten badly a week ago, and his pains won't stop. He's afraid that his one remaining kidney may be damaged. He lost the other kidney when he was shot. Elwood says he's homeless.
Okay, Elwood, there's no bruising around your kidney, which is good.
His Temple cost will run to more than $3,000, and the hospital hopes to get him on Medicaid for at least a partial payment.
So what you should do is just go home, all right? And for 24 hours, just put ice on your ribs, all right? And we want to see you in 3 days.
But Elwood has no bed, no ice, no home. The emergency room can't do anything about that, and Elwood never came back for a follow-up.
Speaking of the whole patient population here, do you do health care or do you do sick care in a place like this?
Predominantly sick care. Predominantly sick care.
Just taking care of their immediate needs right now and then getting them on their way.
Dr. Fred Kaufman is director of Temple's ER.
When a patient comes through that door in terms of immediate and major care, does cost enter your mind?
Absolutely not.
But practicing sick care is more expensive than practicing health care, especially in the emergency room, which is equipped with state-of-the-art technology to deal with traumas, where patients usually arrive without medical records.
Just when people have new seizures, there are a number of tests that should be done. It sounds like those tests have been done.
This woman thinks that she has had a seizure. During the past year, she's been tested at 3 different ERs with the same problem, but there are no permanent records. She doesn't know how she's been diagnosed. Temple will likely repeat thousands of dollars worth of tests to make a diagnosis.
Well, you know, it'd be real great if you could get a hold of those records from the other hospital.
She is on Medicaid, but that will cover only part of the cost. Last year, Temple gave $20 million in free or partial payment care. Fine inner-city teaching and research hospitals, like Temple, stay financially solvent only by appealing to the privately insured patients from outside the neighborhood. They offer specialized procedures not often available in suburban hospitals. Heart and bone marrow transplants, hip and knee replacement surgery. Hospitals like Temple need patients who are fully insured to help pay for the cost of those who come in here not able to pay for all of their care or not able to pay anything at all. This is called cost shifting. Shifting the cost of those who can't pay anything at all or those who are underinsured to those who are fully insured.
Medicaid has traditionally underpaid. So the answer to your question is if it costs $100 to deliver a service, the charge to a commercial insurer might be $200.
Temple Hospital Vice President Dr. Leon Malmuth says while there is a fixed charge for each medical procedure, reimbursement to the hospital varies depending on one's insurance.
It sounds to the casual viewer or listener like healthcare in America has become one massive shell game. Shifting, 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 shifting.
I don't think it's a shell game. I think it's a game, if you wish to call it a game, of desperation.
Survival also means going into the community practicing preventative medicine. 60% of the babies born at Temple are high-risk pregnancies. Some are premature. Others are suffering side effects from the mother's drug abuse. The mothers frequently have had no prenatal care.
Blood pressure's fine. Do you ever have any problems with being anemic, though?
Temple is trying to change things with a program that seeks out pregnant women, new mothers, and their families, promoting health care and childhood immunization.
Very good.
Temple expects that healthy baby and child care will pay off quickly.
And we'll be back again when the baby is born.
By reducing the demand for sick care and easing the pressure on the emergency room. Right now, that pressure is terrific. The burnout rate is very high.
Just want to propose a toast here. Best ER staff anywhere.
This is Tony Cardell's last night in the ER. He's accepted a cardiology fellowship in a town where he hopes the work will be less stressful.
You're going to be the last patient to officially take care of at Temple. Return if you feel bad. I don't know where else a hard King.
ER physicians such as Dr. Cardell, who are stressed and exhausted, move on.
Take care.
The emergency rooms and hospitals remain.
120 calls.
They will continue to be packed and pushed and challenged. So far, they've been able to defray costs by keeping a fragile and tangled system of bookkeeping and cost shifting. But sooner, not later, emergency rooms will reach the breaking point, and someone will have to pay.
Fact, the United States ranks only 22nd in the world in the rate of infant survival. Another fact, as many as 60% of American children under 2 are not adequately immunized against childhood diseases.
Okay. What that means, because it's not expensive enough, isn't meant to be callous and say that they should charge $500 to a homeless person. They wouldn't be able to get it. But please understand the most important function of our market economy, whether it's groceries, gas, healthcare, whatever, the most important function of the price system is to ration things, especially when they're scarce. By rationing, it means we say, okay, there's an infinite amount of care we want, but because of costs and availability of resources or technology, we don't have an unlimited amount of things we can give somebody. But when people see that the emergency room price is $0, you heard the lady say, Temple stays open 24 hours a day. You can come in anytime you want. So if you have a cold and a bottle of Equate cold medicine costs $3.95 at Walmart, and the emergency room is $0, $0 is still less than $3.95. The clinic, Equate, none of this is as good as saying, fine, they're going to be very thorough, I'm not going to have to pay. If we saw the price of gasoline at $0, we would suck all we'd eventually run out of gas. So what we saw just 11 years ago is when when the price system is not allowed to tell somebody, look, it's at least $20, but I only have a cold. Okay, it's at least $20. Now I know how some of you react to this. It's not fair to charge $20. Well, give me a better way. You have to understand the implications of what we're doing here. It's very easy to say, well, that's not right to charge somebody anything. Healthcare should be free. Okay, fine. Then I should just leave now. If healthcare should be free, there's no point talking about a healthcare crisis. It's the mentality that the insured patient has. Yeah, I'll order up everything from the menu. I'm stupid. I broke my rib. It's the mentality that I have. It's the mentality of the person on welfare that says it's absolutely free. It's the mentality of today's elderly people. Today's elderly people, which you pay attention to what's going on there, they show up and their doctor says, well, here's what I think the problem is. And the elderly say, wait a minute. Here's my Medicare card. You refer me to a specialist. But ma'am, you don't need a specialist. Refer me to 3 of them then. This is what the elderly now have a welfare mentality. People with insurance have a welfare mentality. People on welfare have a welfare mentality. So the demand for care is greater than the supply. You get 8-hour waits. You get nurses that are killing themselves. I mean, we've got a shortage of nurses right now. Here's something out of Twilight Zone economics. If there was a shortage of bananas, the price of bananas would go up, and a lot more banana plantations would spring up. We've had a shortage of nurses forever. Supply and demand saying we need more nurses than are available. Salaries are supposed to go up. But even if salaries did go up, nurses are being worked to death right now in the hospitals. They don't care about quality control. They're not concerned about burnout. They're saying, fine, if you go away after only being a nurse for 4 years, there's somebody else in nursing school right now that has it in their mind that they want to help their fellow man. They'll be in here, we'll use them up, and we'll go on to the next one. This is what comes from a healthcare system where supply and demand aren't allowed to work at all. So just understand, it'll never be fixed until price is allowed to do something. And right now it's doing nothing. We hate the doctors. We might ought to hang the lawyers. Now, for those of you that have lawyers in the family, I'm not going to apologize. I'm still going to suggest we hang all of the lawyers and start all over again. You may have noticed that recently, doctors in the trauma units here in Florida said, fine, we quit. And people were saying, how dare those rich doctors threaten to quit? What they don't see is that an OBGYN in America pays $100,000 a year in medical malpractice insurance premiums. Let me get this straight. You're supposed to spend 4 years taking physics and chemistry and biology, and then whatever number of years after that becoming a doctor, and before you turn on the lights and say, I'm open for business to serve my fellow man, your insurance bill is $100,000? What are the doctors supposed to charge to cover that? They've got families to feed. They've got BMWs they need to drive. Oh, that's the problem. They need to get rid of the BMW. Well, maybe we need to not have a system where, for example, the last day of our trip in New Hampshire, I had to spend the next 3 days shopping with my wife, which I wished I'd have just broken my neck or something so I wouldn't have to shop. But the last day we're there, my soreness had kind of gone away. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up and I was thinking, what if I just snuck out and went to the bunny slopes today? Did I just go straight up and straight down? Idiot. Of course, as I'm starting to change clothes, my wife wakes up and says, what are you doing? No. Hang on. But suppose I'd gone back to the slopes. After the doctor said, here, you need to rest and not do anything, crack rib. I go to the slopes. On the bunny slope, I stumble. Okay, I'm trying to use English here. I stumble. My rib breaks, punctures my lung. I take it back to the emergency room. I decide to go to the Yellow Page under attorney and call Mr. Jones there and say, Mr. Jones, I want to sue the doctors in the hospital. Well, what for? Well, they didn't tell me that I couldn't go skiing again. They just said I had a cracked rib. And I thought that, they didn't put a cast on it. I thought it'd be fine. You say, you got to be kidding me. No, I'm not. Bob Jones calls my doctor and says, we've got this economics professor with 3 children. He's a responsible human being. What's this about you guys not telling him? Well, we did tell him. Well, did you document it? Oh, my God. Think about what doctors have to do now. There's a reason why they give you every test in the world and have 8,000 pages of paperwork for everything going on. It's because the blood-sucking lawyers are out there waiting for one T that's not crossed to swoop in and say, fine. Oh, you didn't document that you told Chambliss that he needs to lay off skiing. Fine. What do you want to settle for? And the doctor's going to settle. Because the last thing the doctor wants is Bob Jones or Dr. So-and-so, comma, medical malpractice lawsuit. They don't want that kind of a reputation. So, Bob, the doctor settles with me for $50,000, okay? And then the insurance company for the doctor the next day is faxing them their new insurance premiums. You guys aren't supposed to read the rest of it. They're faxing them the new insurance premiums, which, if you've been paying attention to any of this stuff, insurance premiums are blowing through the roof for everybody. And so it's just like if the government tells automakers, hey, you need to put this extra technology on your cars to make it pollute less. Well, that's a cost of production. As the cost of production goes up, it makes it more expensive to supply the good or service, and to recover the higher cost, they've got to charge a higher price. And so this recent discussion about capping medical malpractice insurance claims, or capping the damages, and what have you, I think is an appropriate discussion to have, because I've seen what can happen in court. I was involved in a case a few years ago where a young baseball player was in a traffic accident out in Los Angeles. He was barreling down the freeway. It was foggy. A tractor trailer came unhinged, swung around. He hit it 70 miles an hour. This guy is as dead as a hammer. Miraculously, he's saved. He sues the California Highway Patrol for not showing up on time. He sues the state of California that hired the construction company that was driving the truck. He sues the trucking company. I get called out. I get hired by the state of California to work as an expert witness because this guy was claiming that the accident caused his baseball career to end, and he wasn't going to be a professional baseball player. Well, at the time, I was a professional sports agent, so they said, hey, you ought to know something about what it takes to play in the major leagues, whatever. And so, here I have baseball fans in here? Okay, here we go. He was a very good baseball player in college, a first baseman, left-handed. Okay, so far so good. 5'8" inches tall. 5'8". He's never going to get drafted as a first baseman, okay? Now, this guy was claiming damages on a Major League Baseball career. He's a college kid, and he's saying his Major League career was now never going to be realized. So I've got to do all the probability theories, the probability of being drafted, probability of making the major leagues, discounted present value of lost salary based on the average Major League career. I come back, of course, with an astronomically low figure that he's even got a probability of getting drafted. But here's the dilemma for the lawyers. Very good-looking kid, head of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, 4.0 student. Originally, the lawyers in the state of California were excited over my dad. This is great. And I said, listen, please settle. If this kid sits on the witness stand, you've got this good-looking kid, solid Christian, 4.0. They're going to bring in the pictures of him in his Little League uniform. They're going to bring the before and after pictures. It's the highway patrol that everybody hates. The jury, here's what the jury does. The jury hears an economist say the probability of him being drafted, blah, 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 blah. And the jury gets the emotional heartstrings pulled by the attorney. And then the jury goes in there and says, $70 million. No rationality whatsoever to the damage award. As a forensic economist, somebody that's supposed to be able to figure out what a left arm that's now gone is worth, it doesn't matter what we say. The juries freak out, and when doctors are on the stand, oh man, the juries sit there and go, all right, rich doctor, poor victim, and the doctors are scared to death, and they should be, because the lawyers know how to milk them for everything they've got. So until we have medical malpractice reform, we're going to continue to have rising healthcare costs. All right, here's the next thing on the list. Technology. Now, normally in a free market economy, we've all seen it, as the technology associated with making CD players continues to increase, they become cheaper to make, more of them show up in the market, and CD players come down in price. Right? Everything that has technology, just wait, it'll get better and cheaper. Not in healthcare. Doesn't happen that way. Now, there's a reason for that, as we're going to see in just a little bit. Think about this for a second. You're shopping around for a place to have open heart surgery. You've got 3 hospitals to choose from. Not knowing anything about surgery, let's just say that each hospital walks you through all the equipment that they have to do the surgery. And you ask each hospital, well, how new is your equipment? Hospital A, we've just taken it out of the box. Brand new equipment. Hospital B and C, the equipment's 2 years old. Since you have insurance, even if the newest equipment would raise the price of your surgery, you're not going to shop around based on price. You're not going to go to B and C and say, oh, yours is a little bit older, it's fine, but I'll buy yours since it's cheaper. Since you have insurance, you're going to pick the most expensive kind. So what happens in healthcare, as we're going to see, is that the hospitals are in competition with one another right now for insured patients, but the competition isn't based on price, it's based on who has the latest and greatest technology. If every year we had a brand new DVD player come out, if the companies that make DVD players didn't get a chance to use the equipment long enough to get their costs down and therefore prices down, if every year it was the latest DVD player, DVD players would stay expensive every year. And that's the pressure the hospitals now face. Since they've got to make sure that the latest and greatest technology is available frequently, then they don't get to use the stuff long enough to get costs down and therefore get prices down. So unlike normal markets, technology doesn't drive down costs. Technology drives costs up. Now, I think I'm going to go ahead and fast forward about 10 or 15 minutes of this videotape. You're going to see we're going to go past some discussion on the malpractice issue. It's kind of boring. I want to go to hospitals these days who now are trying to merge. More and more hospitals have been trying to merge with one another. Hospitals have also recently been saying, listen, they've been telling the government, look, for example, maybe Arnold Palmer might tell the government, look, we specialize in women and children. So why don't we have a market in Orlando where Arnold Palmer only does women and children, Florida Hospital does all the heart and cancer stuff, and this hospital, the comparative advantage. So specialize in what we're best in. And you're going to see in just a moment that if they do that, they're going to prison. Okay? So let me fast forward just a little bit. You guys do whatever you want to do for just a couple of minutes, and then we'll be right back, ready to go. By the way, none of you were coming in here expecting any good news, were you?
No, not anymore.
Okay. Now, what he was referring to at the very end, there were actually 2 or 3 things that you saw in this videotape that I want to address. You already saw the technology issue. What the gentleman just now was referring to is something called the Sherman Antitrust Act. It's an act written in 1890 that makes it illegal for businesses to enter into a contract or enter into a conspiracy or combination that restrains trade or fixes prices. So here's the dilemma. Again, whatever happens in the free market, twilight zone, bizarro world, come over to healthcare. The hospital is saying, look, it's because we're competing that prices are going up. So we've got an idea. Let us call off the competition. Let us merge or just segment the market. But we've got this 1890 law going over here in a standard economics textbook that says, let me get this straight. If we've got, how many hospitals do we have in Orlando? How many different organizations? Just 2? Florida Hospital, Arnold Palmer, about 4 or 5 of them? Okay. The theory, the economic theory of monopoly, mono means one, monopoly, single seller of some product. The theory is that the Justice Department sees is, okay, we have, now all the hospitals deliver babies currently, right? Okay, good. So you've got 5 hospitals in Orlando delivering babies, so supply is 5. If supply goes to 1, well, what would happen if there's only 1 car company? Prices? Only 1 gas station. So the Justice Department says, there's no way. We're going to let all the babies in Orlando be born in Arnold Palmer. You guys will raise the price of having babies there. But they say, but wait a minute. The price of delivering babies is already going up because we're competing. So it's a double-edged sword. Competition drives prices up. The government is worried that if they let them monopolize the market, prices will go up. I've got an idea on how to fix that in just a few minutes, but that's the concern. Now, the biggest part of our health care bill, 40% of the $2 trillion spent on health care, we're about to get to the big enchilada now. If we just solve this problem, we could let the lawyers keep doing what they do, and we could just, nothing else, just this. The last month dilemma. This will blow you away if you've never seen this or heard this. Let's suppose everybody in this room lives 80 years. All of us. On our 80th birthday, done. Now, let's say that you spend $50,000 in your whole life on health care. The way the system currently works is that from 0 to 79 years and 11 months, you spend about 60% of your lifetime expenditure on health care. And in the last month of your life, you spend 40% of your whole life's expenditure on health care. In America, 40% of the $2 trillion spent on health care this year, that is $800 billion, okay? 40% will be in the last month of people's lives. Now, I'm talking to an audience that knows why that happens, right? In America, we don't deal with death very well. Our culture is such that, I mean, I can't even believe I'm going to be dead someday. This is, and a lot of other people this way. I know I'm going to die someday. I don't want to be around when it happens, but I know it's going to happen. But I can see someday, I'm 93 years and 7 months, and I fall over and have a stroke, and I don't mean to be callous at all because something bad has happened. But please understand, I've got to just come out with it for you to understand the dilemma we have. So I'm 93 years and 7 months, and then my wife and my children, and grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, all there, and the doctor comes out and says, Mrs. Chambliss, children, we've done everything we can for Mr. Chambliss. He is never going to return to any sort of gainful, meaningful life. And then they're going to look at my wife and say, what would you like for me to do? What's she supposed to say? Now, she actually likes me. She's not going to pull the plug on me. What a lot of Americans say is, no, keep trying. All right. Every day, hooked up to all this stuff. I die anyway in a month, $400,000 medical bill going to my wife. She doesn't have the money. Hospital eats some of it. Taxpayers get to eat some of it. Insurance, she pays some of it. Insurance company eats some of it. It's because we have not found a way to deal with that last month dilemma and say when enough is enough that we have this problem. Now, it's only going to get worse. We have 76 million people born between 1946 and 1964 called the baby boomers. The biggest cohort of our population, 76 million, who 25, 30 years from now are going to be in the last month of their collective lives. If we never, ever, ever do anything, we're looking at the mother of all cost shifts to insurance companies, taxpayers. We're talking about in the trillions of dollars just to hang on and give them one more month. I've got some ideas on that issue too, and they're very compassionate ideas too, all right? I'm not saying, Mr. Kevorkian, please come on down. You want to know why America will never be able to afford national health care, even if it was a good idea, which it's not? The Canadians don't shoot at each other the way we do. They gotta behave themselves. What is it? What did they say? We're just walking around ootin' a boot, you know, and out, well, they say ootin' a boot. It sounds like ootin' a boot. Yeah. Are you Canadian?
No, my husband.
Yes, your husband's Canadian. Yeah, in other countries that don't have our crime problems we see, the last time I checked, the National Crack Dealers Association does not have an insurance plan. And we've got this drug war in this country where, you know, it's the Al Capone days. Let's see, you're on this corner, I'm on this corner. You're trying to get my market share of a drug. Good, I'll shoot you, and other people walk around the street. So our crime problem, none of them insured, many of the victims uninsured, helps drive our health care costs. We don't want to talk about this one. When I was in college, when I was a sophomore in college, every Saturday morning, almost, I would go down to the store and buy a package of Oreos and a quart of half and half, and consume all of it that morning. When you're 20, you can do that. When you turn 30 and you look under your pillow and it says your warranty has expired, eat one Oreo and gain 7 pounds. Now, have you ever had half and half, other than in your coffee? If you're just, it's like the motor oil of milk. It's the greatest thing in the world. But what we have in America today is a dilemma on our hands. Called fat and sugar, and people saying, I want to do whatever I want to do, but I want you to pay for it. I've got some ideas here too, so we're going to get to the solutions in just a moment, but you need to be aware of the fact that bad diet, sexually transmitted diseases, smoking, drug use, the way we drive around on the freeway, the way we conduct ourselves is driving up the demand for health care over time. And this also, if you look at the data on obesity in the United States of America, it's getting worse. Look at our children. They can't even get off the couch. Even if we wanted them to play, they can't get up. And so what are we going to do now that we've got kids taking Lipitor, 4-year-old people with cholesterol? I don't know if they are or not, but you know, many of them probably should. So as long as Americans aren't given any incentives whatsoever to change our diets, even if you know people from foreign countries and they get over here, they can't believe how big we are. They're astonished. They actually think there's 3 or 4 people wearing one set of clothes walking around. The AMA, the American Medical Association, well, that's a good organization. And I wish the American Economic Association acted the way these guys do. Here's what the AMA does. It's wonderful. The AMA sets guidelines on who gets to go to medical school. Here, you've got to pass these tests, and you've got to be this smart and all this. And they say, okay, here's what you got to do. Now, the interesting part is, every year in America, there's a lot more people qualified to get into medical school than the AMA lets in. Now, the AMA tells us, and I'm not against the doctors. The AMA tells us, well, it's for quality control. If we let every qualified applicant in, we wouldn't be able to have quality control. That's nonsense. Medical school in and of itself is quality control. You either can handle it or you can't. It's like a lot of people want to enter in your occupation, right? And then they look at the list of classes they've got to take, or they get into those classes. There's your quality control. Are you in or are you out? Can you do organic chemistry? No. Go do something else. But the AMA says we have to have quality control. Well, what it really is this. If we can reduce the number of people getting into medical school at the beginning, we artificially reduce the number of people getting out of medical school at the end, and if you artificially reduce the supply of anything, it allows you to charge an unnaturally high price. So I do feel bad for the doctors as they relate to lawyers, okay? But the AMA has been complicit in there being a dramatic reduction in the number of medical schools in the United States over the last several decades. And you'll notice some doctors have to go out of the country to get their degree and then come back and practice medicine. It's a nice little gig they've got. I wish the American Economic Association would reduce the supply of economists too. I think I'd come out ahead on that deal. Two more before we get to possible solutions. Both of these deal with drugs, so let's just show. Here we go. The FDA approval process and the orphan drug law. You know what? Yeah, I got to the last one. The FDA approval process. Okay, here we go. I don't know how the geniuses who do this do it, but years ago, ladies, as you may have heard, somebody scraped off some bark from the yew tree. You remember that one? How did they even think there's a yew tree? Yes, breast cancer. How did they even do that? I don't know, but they did it. So they take the bark of the yew tree and they turn it into something called Taxol, and away we go. We've got a drug to deal with breast cancer. But we've got this group called the Food and Drug Administration, where from the moment Bristol Myers Squibb said, we've got it, Taxol, this is great, then they submit what they've done, all the clinical trials and tests to the FDA, and you've got women suffering in need of this product that we may have some questions about. Do they have any side effects? I don't know. I wonder about the side effects thing. The side effect of cancer is dying, okay? But we've got the government worried about side effects. I'm wondering if I were a woman, if the moment they say, listen, we've got this new drug, there may be side effects, I wonder how many women would like to say, listen, it's my body, I'll go ahead and try it. I'll waive my right to sue. In case you don't trust the drug companies, the last time I checked, making medicines that will kill people, not good for business. No, profits are not going to be earned if you make a medicine or a drug that kills your customers. So we may not like them, but they're actually out there trying to do some good stuff. Not because they love us, because they love money, but that's good enough. The love of money gives us good things. Now, the drug companies tell the FDA, here it is. And it may be 10 or 15 years before the FDA, the government, gives you permission to use it. With many of these drugs, hundreds of millions of extra dollars of expenses are incurred by the drug companies to prove beyond the shadow of a reasonable statistical doubt that the drug is safe and effective. In those 10 years of extra costs that they have to incur that perhaps might be needless costs, not only do people suffer, but when the drug finally comes out, if you ran Bristol Myers Squibb, what would you charge for the drug where the last 10 years you had to incur hundreds of millions of dollars of extra research costs to prove to the government it was okay? You'd have to recover those costs. Now, we'll get to why drugs are less expensive in Canada in just a moment, okay? But I want you to understand that the FDA plays a part in unnatural delays in getting drugs approved, which drives up the price of drugs. Finally, there are some drugs like Taxol that are called orphan drugs. An orphan drug is a drug that has life-saving properties and is so expensive to develop that most companies would orphan it. They wouldn't want to touch it. They wouldn't want to adopt it or try to develop it. So the government has this interesting rule where they tell a company, let's say, guys, gentlemen, let's say somebody develops a cure for prostate cancer someday. That would be a good thing, because you read in your medical books that if a man lives forever, every man will eventually die of prostate cancer. That's the one thing that's going to get all of us. So if some company says, here's a drug for prostate cancer, if it's given orphan drug status, the government tells the drug company, okay, you can be the only company with the right to sell a prostate cancer drug for 7 years. Now, you already spent all this money developing it. Now you're given 7 years to be the only one selling it. What are you going to charge men who have prostate issues? A lot. Now you look at it and say, well, that's terrible. Well, think about the alternative. If we didn't have this law, here's what would happen. They develop the drug, some doctor prescribes it to somebody, and that somebody maybe takes it to a competing pharmaceutical company. They take it in their lab, they reverse engineer the thing, figure out exactly what's in it, they drop their equivalent on the market at a very, very low price because they have no R&D cost whatsoever. The original company, gone. It's kind of like the patent laws. If we don't have some intellectual property right protection over these things that are going to save our lives, nobody's going to have an incentive to save our lives. But you have to pay for that. The orphan drug law ends up creating an expense for those 7 years. All right, so here's the list. And I'm sure in your own experiences, you're going to come across other things that contribute to healthcare costs. But since I only have about a half an hour left, and I know 2 hours of any economist, it can just kill people with the boredom. I want to quickly walk you through some of the economists' answers to this question of what can be done. Let's start with the big debate, national health care. The Dennis Kucinich thing, get profit out of health care. Just turn it all over to the government. I'd like to remind you, it's the same government that has created our public school system. The post office. The driver's license and tag agency. My, those are wonderfully efficient agencies, right? If you think about it, every day, every night we go to bed, and we're not worried if milk's going to be there or if DVDs will be there. The free market is organized chaos. It's 150 million adults waking up every day, concentrating on what they do best, and out of their self-love, they pursue that self-love in a way where they make money and they serve their fellow man. It's very simple. Where we see the government in charge of supply and demand, the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, Cuba, Iraq, everything the government touches as a central planning organization, it destroys. It destroys the market. In the Soviet Union, when the government said, okay, the government will take away property rights, the government will determine who gets health care, how they're going to get it. Well, if the government's in charge, they've got to figure out the price, they've got to figure out what's going to be produced, who's going to get it, all these things. And government just doesn't do this very well because they don't have the right incentives. The government is a not-for-profit organization, and that's the wrong incentive. You see, if the government blows it, let's say we get another terrorist strike and we find out that the Department of Homeland Security absolutely blew it. We can't, unlike Enron, when Enron cheats, lies, and steals, bankrupts, the free market has a mechanism to tell a restaurant, you stink. It has a mechanism to tell somebody cheating us and selling us a bad product, here's our money, we're not going to give it to you anymore. If the Department of Homeland Security messes up and we get another terrorist attack, we can't tell the IRS we're not going to send the money to the Department of Homeland Security because we're going to send it to jail. Everything the government does is not only backed up with force or the threat of it, but since there's no way of punishing the government for making these types of mistakes, the government as a functional monopoly can be inefficient and not care. Look at the public schools. Private school versus public schools. FedEx versus the post office. Where we have the free market, efficiency, quality, speed, because they love themselves. Where we have the government, Ms. Keller passed out the article from yesterday's Wall Street Journal about what's going on in Canada. When you get a chance, read it. waiting lines forever. It takes 77 days to get an MRI in Canada. That's the average wait time. Can somebody please tell me what the average wait time is in America these days? 7 hours? 77 minutes maybe? Maybe 7.7 days because you've got golf that weekend and you want to postpone it? 77 days. What national health care means, first of all, there is no such thing as government health care because government doesn't have any money. Let's got to remember that. First of all, national health care, if you're healthy, let me back up a little bit. I get very excited about talking about government. So let me back up just a little bit. Under our current system, it's very expensive. If you're a healthy person in a free market healthcare system, healthcare is actually very cheap. Because if you don't use it, you don't have any bills. A Band-Aid here and there, vitamins and what have you. Under a national healthcare system, if you're a healthy person, you get screwed more than anybody. Because under national health care, you have to pay taxes into the system, and if you don't use it, you're paying for something you're not even using. You should look at the income tax rates of the countries, the sales tax rates and the income tax rates of the countries have it. I tell my students, yes, we can have national health care. You can't have free health care. There's no such thing as free, but you can have national health care. The only question is, what do you want to pay for it? Do you want, for example, right now in America, the average taxpayer pays 1/3 of his or her income to governments each year. So we work the first 4 months out of the year just to pay taxes. And we can keep the other 8 months. Sweden, beautiful health care, free for everyone. Average tax burden is 62%. In Denmark, if you make $45,000 a year, equivalent of $45,000 a year, you're in the 73% tax bracket. But they have health care. You can have anything you want. Now, some of you might sit there and go, I don't like this Chandler Scott very much. Fine, I understand that. And you don't like me because perhaps you would be willing to pay 62% of your income in taxes to get free health care. Fine, let's do that. Our tax burden, and by the way, I guarantee you our tax burden will be more than 62%. With the health issues, with the baby boomers, with the crime, with the unhealthy lifestyles, Sweden is a homogeneous, small population, and they still have to pay 62%. Can you imagine, 285 million people, the way we act, what health care would cost? Now, so let's just make it easy and say our tax burden rises to an average of 60%. So we get to keep 40% of our money. We send the government 60, but we get Bill Clinton's health security card. That's it. No matter what it is, just turn over the card and the government's got it. You have to ask yourself a question. Are people going to use more of it under those circumstances? Of course they are. So that's going to cause the demand to go up, and that's going to create strains on the system. So the government's going to have to start deciding, oh my gosh, we can't do all of this. The government's have to start deciding how much care is enough, and who's going to get it, what medicine you're going to get. Where do they do this in Canada? In Canada, they set budgets for the hospitals. They give them an amount of money. Here's what you've got to work with for the year. If it's a particularly bad year with car wrecks and the flu, you may show up at a hospital in Canada on November the 13th, and there's a sign on the door, closed for the year. They're out of money. I don't think you want that in the United States of America. I don't think you want 77. Why isn't it 77 days? Well, when MRIs appear to be free, but the government's got to reduce the amount of MRIs available in order to ration care, you reduce the supply. It being free increases the demand. There's your 77-day wait. In the meantime, people are suffering. In Great Britain, national health care, there is now a waiting list to get on the waiting list for health care. The list to get on is so big, they've now got a separate. Okay, when you get on top of the list, you get on the other list, and you're almost there. Doctors from Canada and other European countries are leaving. If you were a doctor and the government told you, you can charge, listen, we got to control costs, you can charge $30,000. You're going to leave. You don't get the massive medical breakthroughs in Europe and Canada like you do here. You don't get the unbelievable technology like you get here. It's expensive, but what we get for it is amazing. In European countries and Canada, they don't have that. You read this, and I'll be happy. You can email me here at the college. I'll photocopy the chapter from my economics book on the full healthcare problem. You do your own research, and you're going to find out the moment the government takes over healthcare in the United States of America, it's going to destroy healthcare in the United States of America. It's just that simple. It's going to be expensive, and it's going to be junk. And I'm not sure you want to be told what your wages are supposed to be under some definition of a fair price for your services. It seems like to me you're supposed to go to college, and wherever supply and demand intersect, that's what you make. I'm not so sure the government even has the right to say, no. You should have gone into health care because you love your fellow man. This $48,000 you've negotiated, forget it. 20 is good enough for you. They got to do something. All right. Something that's going on right now, if you guys have been paying attention to the news, this is pretty new stuff. Hospitals have already begun rationing. And by rationing, not based on price. That's one of the best ways to ration something. Raise the price and people will not use as much of it. How many of you guys have heard on the news that hospitals are now, and doctors are now telling people who are ordering up stuff from the healthcare menu, no, you can't have it. Have you heard about this recently? Polly, have you been paying attention to the news? This is something that will actually help. This is what they should have told me when they were carrying me to the ambulance. They should have said, Mr. Chambliss, we're not sure you need an ambulance. The hospital's only 1.5 miles down the road. Your wife will get there faster. Just put back seat. Or they say, we need an ambulance. But maybe they should say, well, we don't think you need, I need some oxygen. Well, we don't really think you need it. Now, of course, they don't want to get sued and go bankrupt, so they will give you what's medically necessary. But when I got in there, the pressure to do all these extra x-rays and what have you, second and third tests and all this other stuff, that's not there under rationing. They do okay, here's your broken rib. They don't do the extra stuff, or, MRIs and what have you, if they're not medically necessary. That's going to help bring down healthcare costs over time. Some economists have proposed medical savings accounts. It's like an IRA. Instead of insurance, which I wish there was no such thing as health insurance. Give me my $659 a month in salary, and let me take my chances. But here's what would be interesting. What if, like a Roth IRA, the government told you that tax-free, you can set aside a certain amount of money every month into a medical IRA, a medical savings account, that will earn interest, by the way. You're not going to be, as long as you're not going to be using it, whoever's selling it to you, they're going to be able to provide you an interest payment to encourage you to invest in whatever they're out investing in. And so you put whatever money you want each month into the medical savings account and draw down on it whenever you get sick. Now, the difference between that and insurance, under insurance, I don't have as much incentives to be a very responsible human being. If I'm having to directly see my own money going into it as an investment that I'm earning interest on, the less I use it, the more money I make over time on my medical savings account or medical IRA. It's a way of rewarding people for not smoking and taking care of themselves and going around ramps on ski slopes. So you're going to hear more about medical savings accounts over time. Here's one you don't want to see. Remember the guy recently in California that sued to have Oreos removed from America? Do you remember this? Amazing. Well, I don't think we're going that far. But I know you've been hearing about taxing sugar and fat. Or have you not?
The McDonald's, somebody sued
I'm not talking about the lawsuits. I can't even believe that people are suing Burger King, saying that Burger King has victimized them. You know what? Maybe we ought to treat fast food like we treat guns. Do a background check. And my background check would be, you put a scale on the floor right at the counter. And on the wall, you've got a height and weight chart, all right? And you step up to the counter, and you say, I'd like a Whopper, please. They look at the scale and look at the height. Sorry, sir, we've got a background check, and you cannot responsibly handle this one. Why not? It means a lawsuit. Well, what are you suing for? Well, because at 3 o'clock in the morning I saw the lights and they were enticing me to come in. This is where we live. This is America. I don't even understand our country anymore. So, exactly, the lawyers are making a fortune. This is why I started saying, hang them first. Now, what instead is probably going to happen in our lifetime is sugar and fat taxes. Now, when you hear this, you've got to be kidding me. No? And it's actually not a bad economic idea. It's a terrible idea if you think that these products shouldn't be picked on and what have you. But consider what would happen if Nabisco got hit with, say, a $2 per package tax on Oreos. Well, just like with the cigarette companies, when taxes are raised on them, they raise the price of cigarettes. You've got basically two different types of smokers. Well, you've got three different types. People that don't smoke but might consider it, people that smoke casually, people that are addicted. Same thing with food. You've got people that really lay off the bad stuff. You've got people that eat bad stuff occasionally, and you've got people that are addicted to it. Now, the beautiful part about the fat or sugar tax is if you only eat it on occasion, your tax burden is going to be very small. If you're addicted to the stuff, if you're sucking down the Oreos and half for breakfast, then your tax burden is going to be very high. Now, the reason I like this, if we lived in a country where people said, let's say the social contract with one another was, if I hurt myself, I'll pay for it myself. If we lived in that country, I'd never support a fat tax or a sugar tax. But we live in a country, people say, I'm going to do whatever I want, and at the end, if I'm poor and I'm young and I get sick, I'll go on Medicaid and let the taxpayers foot the bill for my behavior. If I'm old and irresponsible, I'm going on Medicare and let the taxpayers pay for it. I don't know if that's a moral way to conduct a contract with our fellow man. So maybe if we had the fat and sugar tax, if when the price went up, people who are addicted, they keep eating it, good. And we could take all that money from the fat and sugar tax and put it in an account, so that when people showing up with those diseases down the road say, I'm now sick, they've already prepaid for their long-run health care from the taxes they paid for being irresponsible to begin with. That's the idea. And the economics behind it are pretty doggone good. You don't eat the fat, you don't have to pay. You don't smoke, you don't have to pay. You gorge yourself, and you're going to have to pay higher prices for it. And I guarantee you it's coming. Here's an idea I have for this last month problem. Actually, I've got a couple of ideas. At the risk of offending some of you on moral grounds, I'm in favor of what Oregon recently did with respect to physician-assisted suicide. I am a civil and economic libertarian, which means I believe your body is your body. So, if at the end you have a terrible illness and you're suffering, and if you want to use your money to pay somebody to end your life and end your suffering, even though I would never kill myself because it violates my moral beliefs, this is my opinion, I don't believe that my morals should go into the voting booth and become legislation, unless you're hurting somebody else. So on the physician-assisted suicide, Oregon recently passed a law that allows people to do this. Now, that's one way of this last month of the life thing being dealt with. But that, I imagine, to most people seems a little bit ghoulish. So let's try this instead. You know what a living will is? A living will. Now, I know some of you might say, well, you know, families can still interrupt it. I understand that. But a living will lets you list the things in effect. If this happens to me, do not resuscitate, pull the plug, I'm done. It increases the likelihood that it'll be taken out of your family's hands, and it removes emotion from the equation. The problem is it costs money. And when you're like me, 37, pretty healthy, you don't think about, I'd rather spend $500 on something else, like alcohol, than $500 on a living will. So I've got no incentive. So one idea I have is maybe to have a tax credit where if you get a living will, you can deduct dollar for dollar, like the child tax credit, the full cost. You might say, why? I'd rather have the taxpayers save $500 now than cost me $200,000 at the end. And for poor people, I wouldn't even mind having the government have a program where it paid poor people that couldn't afford a living will, just pay, and don't make enough in taxes to have a tax credit, just paid their full fee to have a living will. Again, on the idea you can plunder your fellow man's $500 now, or the poor person plunders you a lot more later on. So I think we need to ask some more pragmatic questions. And I think the living will is actually a responsible way of me conducting myself with respect to my own family. I don't want my wife to have to answer this, and I don't want you to have to pay for my 93rd year and 8th month of life. Malpractice litigation reform we've talked about, whether it's caps on lawsuits. I tell you, in addition to caps on lawsuits, I really like Great Britain's system. It's called the loser pays system. You bring a lawsuit in Great Britain against somebody, and you lose, you pay for all of their legal expenses. Guess what the number of lawsuits in Great Britain is compared to the United States? A lot lower. A lot lower. This is more controversial, but we do not need the Food and Drug Administration. This is my opinion. Other economists agree. I kind of like to try to defend it for just a couple of seconds. What organization makes sure that well, government's everywhere, aren't they? Let me see if I can walk you through this one. I submit to you that even if we did not have the Federal Aviation Administration, flying would be safe. You don't even need the FAA, and you'll be perfectly fine. No way, planes will start falling out of the sky. No. A new jet costs $149 million. I don't like to fly that much, but every time I take my seat and I start thinking crash and stuff, I sit there and go, $149 million. I just keep telling myself $149 million. What does that mean? Delta doesn't care about me, but they care about $149 million. So they have an incentive to take off and land. Not take off and go, oh, what the hell? It's just $149 million in the side of a mountain now. The drug companies. You trust Publix to sell you food that's not going to kill you. You trust the clothing companies to sell you clothes that will catch on fire in the dryer. Why do they sell you clothes? Because if they sold you clothes that caught on fire, you wouldn't buy them and they'd be out of business. Please understand that the pursuit of profit shows how much businesses love us. Because if they don't make profit, they're not going to stay in business. The drug companies don't have to care about us, but they care enough about money that without the FDA, you'd still get safe drugs. And you get them a lot faster, yes, every now and then. Every now and then they'd say, listen, we've done the test, we think this drug is good, and then, oh my gosh, it's killing some people. Well, that's what a collapsing stock price is good for. That's what bankruptcy is good for. And that signals, look, every bankrupt company, every corrupt company is economic fertilizer. They die and they fertilize the ground with information to the other companies about how you're supposed to conduct your business. And those other companies go, ooh, I don't want to do that. I'd like to keep making profit. You don't need the FDA to have safe, effective drugs. And I know some of you are going to disagree with that completely, but that's your right to do so. The final proposal that I see kicked around a lot for how to fix healthcare is to do nothing. We have, thanks to people like you here in this room, we have, no questions asked, the greatest healthcare system in the world. This farm kid several years ago, remember in some farming accident, he got both of his arms cut off? Remember that? It was like North Dakota or someplace, and went back there with a pencil and dialed 911. They came out and reattached his arms. In Mexico, he's dead. All throughout South America, Asia, and parts of Canada now, all around the world, if you've got some traumatic accident that's happened, or you've got cancer, or you've got a breached baby, or whatever, you want the problem to happen in America. Foreign leaders come over here for their health care. The best health care in the world. The best food in the world costs a lot. The best cars in the world cost a lot. So perhaps, maybe there is some good news. Perhaps we should look at America's healthcare system and say, let's get this straight. Nothing's wrong with it. It's expensive, there's some flaws here and there, but overall, under the theory of relativity, relative to everywhere else, it's a great system for keeping us alive, for promoting life expectancy rates that keep growing every year. And so it might be the best that we can do under the most rational circumstances. In other words, you're not going to ever get to the point where you're turning homeless people away in the street. You're probably not going to privatize the FDA. All of these other things might help, but in the political reality we live in, they're probably not going to be implemented. So maybe we ought to just be happy we have what we have and accept the fact that it's going to be expensive. Now, I don't necessarily agree with this, but some economists have said, don't do anything. Because doing something, who would end up doing it? Government. Sometimes doing something to fix the problem makes the problem even worse. And I tell you what, from where I come out as a free market libertarian economist, I trust the people in this room a whole lot more than I trust some bureaucrat in Washington making healthcare decisions. There's no way I'd ever want to see them supplementing their judgment for your judgment. All right, that's all I have. I appreciate your time.
Does anybody have any questions for Jeff?
5 more minutes talking to an economist. I wonder if they want to leave now. Holly, that's a terrible question. They want to go home, so I'm going to let them go home. You guys have a good day.